Each story is different, but the through line is that we are the product of some kind of intervention. And I think we have to be honest with ourselves and say there appears to be some kind of intervention in our distant past. When? 200,000 years ago. When we begin to embrace the science that tells us something happened, let's let go of the old story that no longer serves us. We are malleable beings. We're taught that we come into the world with a code that is set in stone and you get what you get. When I go to the doctor's office, if I go once a year, I go for a physical and I fill out this form and they ask the same question. Have either of your parents ever had any of these? And then they give you this list. Well, I have to say yes to all of them because my father had every single one and some that aren't even listed on there. But I also have to say I attribute to lifestyle. It has nothing to do with my life now unless I choose to live the life that my father lived. If I choose to live the life that my father lived, then it's very probable that I would have those same experiences. But they link that the thinking is that DNA is inherited from one generation to the next, and it's locked in stone. Epigenetics is changing all of that. Our environment, our external environment, our emotional environment, our psychological environment, our nutritional environment says that all of those things are subject to change. So we're not locked in. We are not defined by our past unless we choose to be defined by our past. We're not defined by the genetics that our parents have given us unless we choose to be defined by those genetics. It's not right, wrong, good, or bad. It's just that this is what we're finding out about ourselves. I'm going to go to our next discovery. I want to talk about brain states. This is so interesting to me because when I was in school, and most of you, when you were in school, we were taught that there are essentially 4 brain states. And scientists, medical doctors that I talked to said, this is it. There can't be any more. Because the human brain, the neurons, the circuitry in the human brain cannot possibly sustain higher frequencies than what we already know about right now. So let me show you. I was in school. Most of you, when you were in school, and if you got kids in school now, they're pretty much still teaching this. The first is the delta brain state. I know you're familiar with it. Look at what a long, slow wave that is. This is a really deep, deep sleep. It's a healing sleep. It's what I call black hole sleep. You ever have a sleep and you wake up and you don't even know that you've been asleep? You have no dreams that you remember. It's just like, I guess I was asleep because I woke up. So, and I always am happy when I wake up. I say, wow, I woke up again. This is so awesome. So that is what the delta waves look like, all right? The theta waves, how many in here are involved in theta healing at all? Some of you. You're going to love where we go with this. This is the theta wave. It's still a long, slow wave, but it's not quite as slow. It's got a little bit faster, information happening here. This is where we typically are in meditation, when we go into deep meditation. Or the healing state. This is the body's healing state. Now, I'm going to call your attention. I want you to know, I said long, slow waves. Look at the frequencies. 0.1 hertz to 3 hertz is the delta wave. 0.1 hertz to 3 hertz. 4 to 7 hertz, 7 cycles per second, is the theta wave, all right? The alpha wave, a little bit faster. You can see this is a faster wave. This is when you're relaxed, in a very creative state. When as a musician, when I'm writing a song or I'm trying to learn someone else's song, do a cover, or if I am writing a book and developing information to go for the book. Look at this. This goes from 8 to 15 hertz or 15 cycles per second. And then beta consciousness, this is hopefully where you are right now. I think most of you are in beta. Some of you might be in alpha right now. I don't know, deeply relaxed. But this is when you're alert, you're concentrating 16 to 30 cycles per second. It's a lot faster wave. Scientists for years, they said, this is it. They said there can't be any more. The human brain cannot sustain anything beyond that. Then they began working with the Tibetan meditators. And the Tibetans said, well, actually, if we do a certain kind of meditation, we can exceed that. And the researchers said, show us. So what happened was they brought them into the laboratory. They They started in the monasteries when they were in Tibet. And they actually began with the young people. The young people are trained from a very early age to attain these higher brain states. And it's easier for them. They've never been conditioned out of it. All right? So the young people, I love this image. These are Tibetan monks in the monastery in Tibet, and look at the laptops right in front of them. They're hooked up to EEG monitors, and they're getting readings that the medical doctors say, you can't do that. And the monks said, okay. But we are. So they said, well, we have to bring you into the laboratory in the US and into Western Europe. So they began bringing them so they could put them into devices like this. I love this. And the monks, they said, we need you to put on a robe so we can do an MRI. And the monk says, I'm already wearing a robe. I don't need another robe. But they love to laugh. The monks, they love to giggle and they love to laugh. And I think it's important to achieve these higher brain states. So they said, when we begin to do certain kinds of meditation, and I'm going to tell you what they are. You've actually already embarked upon this journey already. They said, we can exceed 30 hertz. We can exceed 30 cycles per second. So the beta brain state was no longer the top. They said, we can take this up to another brain state between 30 and 80 cycles per second. The scientist says, wow, we've never seen that. We didn't know that was possible. We're going to stay with the Greek terminology, and we have to have a name for the new brain state. It's called gamma. So the gamma brain state, 30 to 80 hertz. But that's it. The human brain is topped out. We cannot possibly embrace. It cannot sustain. The human brain cannot sustain anything higher than 80 cycles per second. And the Tibetan said, well, actually, if we do a little bit different kind of meditation, we can exceed that. And the researcher said, well, show me. So they went into a deeper form of meditation, and they were able to take that 80 hertz all the way up to what now is called hypergamma. It's still the same brainwave, but from 80 hertz all the way up to 100 cycles per second, 100 hertz. And the scientists were pretty blown away, and they said, okay, maybe we were wrong about this. I'm just paraphrasing a scientist. Maybe we were wrong, but this is it. This has to be it. The human brain, the neurons electrically cannot sustain anything beyond 100 cycles per second. It's just not possible. And the Tibetan said, well, if we begin to do a little bit different kind of meditation. Now, they're not using any external technology. It's all happening in here, and that is why I'm so passionate about sharing it with you. We are wired for these extraordinary potentials. You can use gadgets if you want to get you there, but you don't need them. And this is where we find our mastery. The Tibetan said, if we do a different kind of meditation, we can exceed 100 hertz. And the scientist said, there's no way. How far do you think you can go? Well, I'm just going to tell you, they doubled it. They doubled it, and there now is a brain state above hypergamma. They had to stay with the naming convention from the Greek letters. It is called the lambda brain state. The lambda brain state begins at 100 hertz and tops out right now at 200 cycles per second. 200 hertz. They are extremely conscious when they are in this state, and they are very awake. But if you walked in to someone who is meditating at 200 cycles per second, you wouldn't know that. You might think they're taking a nap because they are so awake within, but it's not showing externally. Now, I personally believe this is not the end yet, because our neurons are designed, the way they interact with the field around us, they are designed to sustain much, much more than this. And this is, we're only beginning to understand. This is part of your humanness, but if we compromise our brain states and begin implanting chips and allowing the chips to do what we are designed to do, we're going to lose these capabilities. The first generation, a few people try it and you say, okay, that's cool, that's fun. Pretty soon that becomes the way to do it, and pretty soon everyone is doing it through a chip, and no one remembers how to access this powerful facet of humanness, and then we begin to atrophy those parts of our bodies that we're not using. Does that make sense to you if I say it? So I'm very passionate about this. The humans must prevail. Our humanness is so precious. At least know what it is before we allow it to be compromised, and we are not at that point right now. Let me go one step further, one step further. So the scientist said, well, this must be it. We now have a new map of the brain states, right? And the Tibetan said, well, actually, there is another brain state in a place where you typically don't look. You haven't looked yet. It's on the other end of the spectrum. And they said, well, what do you mean? I mean, the other end of the spectrum, it begins at less than 1 cycle per second. It begins at 0.1. How can you get less than 0.1? Tibetan said, we'll show you. And they went into a meditation and a brain state, and their brain state is 0 cycles per second. To an outside observer, there is no discernible breath, there is no discernible heartbeat, there is no discernible pulse, and they are very, very much alive and very conscious. It is called the epsilon brain state, and it is from 0 to 0.1 hertz. Now, here's why I'm sharing this with you, because it's really interesting. What they discovered, what the scientists found, is that the high end of the lambda brain state and the low end of the epsilon, they both lead to the same state of consciousness. Isn't that interesting? They both take you to the same state. One of them, you're in a very awake and an aware state. The other one, you're more in a dreamlike state. But look at this. They both go to exactly the same place. Different brain states, same state of consciousness. And what this suggests is that we have the ability to tune our brain. When we are creating these different tunings in here, it's allowing us to access different bodies of information out there, different fields, different places within the field, and as other forms of life do. And this is how we communicate with other forms of life. Horse whisperers, dog whisperers, cat whisperers, plant whisperers. What they're doing, they are empathing. We'll talk about empathing after lunch. They're empathing with the other beings in their immediate environment, and they're tuning their consciousness to those other beings. And this is allowing them to communicate in a very meaningful way. There are different kinds of channeling, and some do it better than others. So the act of channeling, you could consider the act of channeling the act of tuning your body to a field of information that exists in the field that connects all things, that is now acknowledged by modern science. The act of tuning the body to that place, the reason I'm hesitating is because when conscious full body channels have been measured, what happened is that they were active in all of these brain states simultaneously. At the same time, they were awake and asleep. At the same time, they were in epsilon, they were in lambda. All of these were active at the same time. That is a fully realized, fully potentialized human being. Because I wanted to get the technical aspects under our belt that help us to think differently about ourselves. You know, young kids in school today are taught, I'm just going to give you, there's a chemistry book that is commonly used that has a definition of life. I'm going to do this from memory because I've seen this so many times. Our young people are taught that the definition of life, here's a textbook definition of life. Life is a behavior pattern that chemical systems exhibit when they reach a certain level of complexity. That's what your kids and your grandkids are being taught. Is the definition. Doesn't that feel special? Life is a behavior pattern that chemical systems exhibit when they reach a certain level of complexity. No matter how you say it, it sounds very sterile. Where's the specialness of the life? When we begin to embrace the science that tells us something happened, something mysterious happened here 200,000 years ago, we don't know what it is, but we're the result of whatever that something is. We begin to think of ourselves in a little bit different light. Now the question, we know that we are genetically wired for extraordinary capacities. And I could talk about others. There's chromosome 2, chromosome 7 are important. But there are others now that are being revealed. We're not the result of these random mutations that you and I have been led to believe. And that just, I can't emphasize enough, it changes everything. I'm just going to ask you, do you feel any differently about yourself? And you don't have to say yes because you're in the Gaia room. But what we just saw, how many of you did not know about the fusions in chromosome 2 and 7? Anybody? Okay. How do you feel when you see those things? I mean, does it invite you to think differently about yourself? I heard the conversations happening before I left the stage. I heard you all talking. And it's very cool to hear people talking about, wow, I didn't know about chromosome 2 and 7. So what kind of things come to mind? What do you think? What do you feel when you see those things? Anybody? Pardon me? Not an ape. Well, one of the questions is, if the fusion came from two pre-existing primate chromosomes, where did those chromosomes come from? Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know specifically. It appears that who or whatever is responsible for our existence. As a scientist, I cannot tell you what it is. I don't know. I have my own personal feelings. And as I have spent so much of my adult life studying with the indigenous people throughout the world, I mean, the Tibetans and Nepal and India and Bolivia and Peru and all through the American desert Southwest and the Aboriginals in Australia and in Africa and beyond, the through line of their story, each story is different, but the through line is that we are the product of some kind of intervention. And I think we have to be honest with ourselves and say there appears to be some kind of intervention in our distant past. When? 200,000 years ago. Who or why or what that is, every one of those stories tells us something different, but they all tell us that we have a relationship that extends far beyond what we've been led to believe here in this world. So as I mentioned, I have scientific friends that say, well, we've got to understand our origin before we can ever embrace these capabilities. And my feeling is, if we will honor ourselves and develop the mastery that is inherent within each of us, that mastery is going to lead us to the story of our origin and our capabilities and perhaps something even greater. And I think it holds the potential to be one of the most unifying discoveries at a time when our world is so polarized, when the world is so focused upon our differences, to find something that unifies us in such a powerful way at just the right moment in history. It's no accident that we haven't made these discoveries in the past. It's only when the technology led us to the point that we could look into the DNA that we're now able to see we're not what we've been told. And I believe that means that we have the consciousness to embrace what the implications are. So I think it's no accident that's happened that way. And as we embrace everything, these extraordinary potentials, I think that may open the door to understanding the deepest truths of our existence and come full circle. And that's where I want to go with all of this. So I'm going to begin now with discovery number 6. How do we awaken this potential? Well, this is another discovery that is relatively recent. You know, the human heart, when I was in school back in 1950s, 60s, early 70s, I was taught that the heart is, with the brain, is the master organ in the body. I'm just going to ask, how many of you were taught the brain is the master organ in the body? I was too. And, you know, the brain is important. There's no doubt about that. The brain's important, but now what we know is that the brain receives much of the instruction that tells the brain what to do comes from the human heart. And the human heart creates those instructions based upon the way we feel about the world around us and about the world within us, our perceptions. Not even what's real, it's what we perceive as being real. So when we perceive, when we sense that we're not safe, for example, and we live in constant anxiety, and we live in constant vigilance, our heart is sending a very specific kind of signal to the brain, and the brain is responding by flooding the body with the chemistry that matches that signal. So if you feel that you're not safe, here's what happens. Your body does one of two things. You're either in regeneration and rejuvenation mode, or you are in survival mode. It's hard for the body to do both simultaneously. So if you feel that you're constantly in a state of fear, that you're not safe, then your body shuts down the healing response. It shuts down the rejuvenation and the regeneration response because your body says, we've got to deal with survival. And I'll tell you, one of the places, a living laboratory, are the refugee camps that are happening in the Middle East right now, because there's an entire new generation of children that are being born and only know living in the threat of a refugee camp. Their brains are not developing properly, their bodies are not developing properly because they are in constant stress, fight or flight. And there are organizations, and I'm going to talk to you about some of those, who are helping to change that by doing precisely what you and I are going to do within the next 90 minutes. By harmonizing the heart and the brain in a very, very powerful way. And this is what I want to talk to you about. So it's interesting because we scientists believed that we knew so much about the heart transplants. First transplants in the 1960s, South Africa, DeBakey, I think some of you remember the first heart transplants when they were happening. And we now do about 10,000 heart transplants a year. And for the most part, they're successful. And because they are so successful, scientists say, well, we must understand pretty much everything there is to know, or we wouldn't have this level of success. So imagine their amazement. A discovery was made in 1991. It was published in 1994 of a new class of cells. They're called sensory neurites. Scientists discovered about 40,000 specialized cells in the human heart. 1991, it's published in the journal. Look at the name of the journal. The name of the journal tells the whole story. The journal is called Neurocardiology. Neuro means what? Cardiology is what? Heart, brain. This is a new journal made to reflect the power of these discoveries. Neurocardiology, Oxford University Press, 1994. The heart's nervous system contains about 40,000 specialized cells in the heart. They are configured in a way that makes a neural network, but the neural network is in the heart. It's not in the brain. These are brain-like cells, but they're not in the brain. In the cranial brain, they're in the heart. So scientists actually call this now the little brain in the heart. You can Google it. Don't Google it now, but later. Later you can Google it. It's actually called the little brain in the heart. Now, this is a very, very powerful discovery by science, because almost universally our ancestors, ancient traditions, indigenous traditions, always told us that the heart is really where the action is. I did an experiment a few years ago, and we were doing pilot programs with young people. So first we started with programs with second graders, 8 or 9 years old. I don't have any children of my own, so I have to think about the age groups. I'm getting better. So yes, is that right? 8 or 9-year-olds, second grade approximately. Then we did middle school, and then we did high school seniors. And I asked these young people, I'd say, when you find yourself in this room, can you show me, where are you? And almost universally they go, I'm here. It's just this real, I'm here. Or when I talk to indigenous people from throughout the world, I said, you live here on earth, where are you right now? I'm here. It's almost a reflex. We don't say, I'm here. We say, I'm here, because the heart, we know the heart is the seat of this very, very powerful experience. I'm just going to ask a couple of telling questions. What's the first organ that developed in your body when you were in your mother's womb? Take a wild guess. It's the heart. And we still don't know. To this moment, scientists cannot answer the question, what happens? What happens when one moment there's this little bundle of cells that are just sitting there, and the next moment a heartbeat happens? What was that? What caused that heartbeat? Scientists have all kinds, they talk about sodium ion potentials across cell walls and all these kinds of things. But you know what the indigenous people say? Right up here down there in northern New Mexico, I'm in Colorado now. In northern New Mexico, and when I was with the Tibetans, they tell me the same thing. I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time in Tibet in the 90s and early 2000s, and that's going to be important here in a little while. Tibetans tell me the same thing. They say that first heartbeat is the moment that the power of the soul enters the physical body. Isn't that interesting? Now, as a scientist, I can't talk about the soul scientifically because it's not acknowledged scientifically, but we all know that there is something there. There is a power, there's an energy. And one of the fascinating things to me, I'm a scholar, and I've spent a lot of my life researching texts that were either deleted from popular religious texts, the 43 books that were removed from the Christian Bible, for example, or the books that were removed from the Hebrew Bible, or the Gnostic traditions that were discovered in the 1940s, or some of the other traditions. All of these traditions, so fascinating to me, they tell a story of the creation of the human body. And they all say that we are the product of an intentional creation, number one. They always say that when they created the human body, not he or she, but they, suggesting that there was a group of some kind. And they all say that the first human bodies were not capable of sustaining the power of light or the power of the soul in the physical world, that it took multiple iterations, multiple attempts, multiple formulas of DNA to find the right formula for the genetic blueprint that would hold the power of the soul in the physical world. Isn't that interesting? It's not science. I'll be very clear. I can't say that as a scientist. But when you see a story across such disparate traditions that has such a similar theme, I don't know that the story is true, but there's usually some element of truth in that. As a geologist, I saw this. Almost universally, ancient traditions tell about a great flood. They say there was a great flood that swept the earth, and each tradition talks about what that flood meant to them. As a geologist, what I can tell you is we see evidence of that flood. It did happen. It didn't cover the entire earth. It covered a lot of the earth. It was right at the end of the last ice age when the ice melted. The water needed to go somewhere. Sea levels rose, and a lot of land was inundated when that happened. So it's a beautiful example. There's a through line. The story is a little different, but the universal nature of the flood is throughout. The story is different, but the universal nature of us being the product of some kind of intervention. So some of you, you ask me these questions during breaks and things all the time. I think as a scientist, we have to acknowledge it appears there's been some kind of intervention and say we don't know, and let's let go of the old story that no longer serves us and see if you can see the difference. There's a huge difference between forcing every iota of data to fit into a pre-existing story. That's what's happening right now. All the new discoveries are being forced to fit into the theory of evolution, even if they don't fit. It's like a square peg in a round hole. If you pound hard enough, it'll go, but it's never a good fit. There's a big difference between that and allowing the new discoveries to lead to whatever story they're going to tell. Do you feel that difference? It's a big difference. And this is an invitation. The new book is an invitation for credible scientists to do just that. Allow the new discoveries to lead to whatever our story is going to be. So I wanted to say that as we go on, because what we're doing here is a big part of this. 1991, science discovered these 40,000 sensory neurites. The heart has its own brain, and I want you to see precisely where these are. If you can see, this is a diagram of the human heart. Every place where you see, even if you can't see and read the words, every one of those little dots is an area where those neurites are. And what they are showing you is they're placed around the valves and the arteries that control the heart. So when we are feeling anxious, or when we feel that we're not safe, or if we feel a sense of well-being and a sense of ease, we're actually informing the neurons that regulate how our heart is functioning in our bodies. And what we're beginning to find is the heart, is it a pump? Yes. But you can build a machine that pumps the blood. The heart does so much more than pump the blood. And that's where we're going to go with this. The neurons in the heart. Now, I want to be very clear what we're talking about. The neurons are the blobs that you see. The neurites are the branches that come out. All right? 40,000 sensory neurites are what are discovered in the human heart. This has led to a new study about what is called heart intelligence. I'm fascinated by this, heart intelligence, because what we now know is that the little brain in the heart, it thinks independently of the cranial brain. It remembers independently of the cranial brain. It feels independent of the cranial brain, and it senses. And it's not a metaphor. This is a literal memory.